So now this is more like everyone, it's like a floor for everyone, right? What I want to understand is how, in your experience, has consumer behavior changed over the last decade, right? And how do you ensure that that has had an impact on, or that has had relevance in the product that you're building?
So yeah, see, I think I mentioned about doing a lot of website work back then, right? What I could relate to is in the web 1.0 world, right? It was about one way, it was more like a marketing medium, right? For companies to sort of talk to consumers and explain to them what they are doing, right? It was more about us, services, products, contact, etc. So it was for consumers to get introduced to brands, right? Like, over internet, which is where I think a lot of the consumer behavior moved from using the internet for trials, product, services, to pretty much engaging, right? Like, and creating a community for themselves, right? And there was a huge shift, right, that we started seeing. Orkut, Facebook, and pretty much all of the other brands, they started now selling products online, right? Earlier it was just lead generation, like consumers have to seek out. So there was just only early adopters, right? Like, who were very enthusiastic, right? Like, who were technology savvy, right? Like, they were seen as tech savvy people who could even know how to even communicate over the internet, right? Writing an email. Oh, you have an email. Okay, right? Like, so the behavior there was pretty much like seek and you shall get, right? Like it moved into, okay, now things are coming to me, right? Like, and what I saw over there was like, suddenly, right? Like, there was an explosion of content, right? Like, where pretty much, this is not content in terms of like social content or like video content. This is more about more websites, right? Like, and pretty much like search was widely available for people. So you started seeing a lot of early majors coming in, right? Like, so pretty much that's where your adjacent users started coming in. Right. So I started pulling in my family, my friends, they started pulling their families. So the whole house, right? Like, of an Indian household started coming into sort of leveraging a product or service from the internet. So that was happening. This was a big shift that was happening there. And what it did was suddenly, right? Like, I mean, there was a big shift in terms of how people would use some of these services, right? Like, like what now that probably is Web 3.0 where people are using to just, find out a key or like, or pretty much like get a laptop, Dunzo, or things like that. But back then, there was a big shift in the way that people eventually started transacting in the platform, right? So pretty much going from just, asking how a service or product could be leveraged to people now could do self-serve, right? Like, the self-serve unlocked a lot of things, right? Suddenly, you could just now get a product or a service by yourself, right? Like, and there's no one who's just having loops and loops of conversation where you're getting confused about what you're getting, how you're getting. Pretty much all of the information is on the internet. You can just Google it up, and eventually you can, if you're looking for validation, it is also available on the internet. And that accelerated a lot of discovery process, a lot of buying process, right? Like, and eventually the adoption of some of these internet services, right? Yeah. So that's the big explosion that happened from somewhere around 2009, 2010, and widespread of mobile phones sort of, even though, it was pretty early stages, I felt that there was a lot of acceleration that was happening back then. To now, consumer behavior is more around pretty much the medium internet is omnipresent, right? Like, it's oblivious to people. They don't even, now pretty much it's become so natural that the bigger the network, the more value for users, right? So that's where it has come down to. So it's come down to like, pretty much like, first seeking content to pretty much content coming to you to now pretty much you are participating, generating content and pretty much interacting with the medium, right? So that's how the consumer behavior has evolved. Consumption has evolved. Adoption is accelerated. Like, you don't no more wait for like, days and weeks to see cohorts, right? Like, pretty much if you have a clear product and if you have a clear voice that you can communicate to the right consumers just adopt in a frenzy, right? Like, that's what is happening right now in the Indian industry at least, right? Like, very similar to what has happened in China, in India also it's the same.
Right. Interesting.
But at the same time, what happens is that now we've been doing this for a while now, right?
Yeah.
So at least from the marketing side of things, users are seeing content on a daily basis. Every second they are seeing content, different types of content. And it is not just in Indian context. They are seeing
Yeah.
the content which is coming from California to Japan to everywhere. So they are trained to see things certain way. Now users have that as a standard. So even the content that we are creating in Bangalore or Kerala or anywhere in India, they are expecting the standard needs to be that.
True.
So doesn't matter you are spending this much or that much. They decide everything in that first 2-3 seconds, right? The attention span also gone down to a level. For example, whenever I see Swiggy's performance ads and all, I wonder like, my God, this could be like a marketing budget for a small company's entire year. Because even the performance ad users are expecting that kind of a quality, right? So that is also there. And especially when a brand is trying to be funny on social media, now I think that is also reaching a limit where people are like, man, I know you're a brand. Just tell me what the offer is. I don't need to get your Mother's Day wishes and stuff. Just tell me what the offer is. Right? So the performance ads especially has become very direct now. Hey, this is what it is. You take a call. Brands has reached
That is true. That is true.
Because your 10%, 15% users are like, we know. And that's like a basic. You tell me something which is like earth shattering, then I will look. So now the problem with the agencies and the design teams are now that there's a question like, should we also shout like everybody else shouting, or should we mute ourselves and show that, hey, we are the mute one, so maybe that could give us traffic. So everybody is trying to think in a very unique way, especially in the marketing side.